everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 thriller books of 2021. I've done a video where I wrap up my top 21 books of 2021 just in general across all of the genres that I read. So that includes thriller, horror, fantasy, romance, speculative, literary fiction. It's just a whole mix of different types of books I read. But the genre that I read the most of and that I know a lot of you watch me for is thriller books. So I wanted to do a separate video where I just talk about my top 10 thriller books of the year, and not just the thriller books that I read in 2021, but the top 10 out of the books that were published in 2021. So these are new thrillers in the past year that made my top 10 rankings that I would recommend to all of you. So if you're looking to pick up a thriller book and some of my top 3 maybe you've read, then this is a little bit of a bigger list of thriller books from the past year that you could try to pick up for yourself. I ended up reading 38 thriller books last year, 30 of which were published in 2021. So I had a pretty good amount of books to choose from to narrow down a top 10. So these are all books that I gave either 4.5 or 5 stars that I really enjoyed and that I would definitely recommend to you. I will also give you a fair warning. Some of my choices are a bit questionable or controversial. There are some thrillers that I really enjoy that a lot of people don't seem to enjoy. What I enjoy in a thriller is if it is something that is really fast paced, if it's engaging, if it keeps me on the edge of my seat, if it surprises me, and if it makes me forget that I'm reading. I really like a thriller book where I just get sucked in and I just need to know what's going on. I need to know what happens. I need to get to the plot twists and figure it all out, even if it's dumb, even if it's over the top, even if it's cheesy, even if it's unrealistic. That is what I eat up. That is what I like in a thriller book. So if your tastes tend to align with that, then this should be a pretty good list for you. But there may be a couple in here that maybe you've read and you disagree with, or you've seen a lot of other people not like. So just go into those, I guess, with a little bit of a grain of salt, or just know my perspective on them and why I enjoy them. That being said, let's go ahead and just jump on into the books. We're going to be doing a countdown style, so you can stay tuned to get to my #1 thriller book of the year at the end of the video. To start, I do have a couple honorable mentions that I want to throw out. These are books that are kind of thrillery, but they're not necessarily a thriller, and so they couldn't be included on this list, but they are books that I really loved, that I really want to recommend, and that I didn't want to do this video without somewhat mentioning. The first one is The Push by Ashley Audrain. This is more of a psychological suspense literary drama with a little bit of thrillery elements. It often gets categorized as a thriller by many others. It's just not just a thriller, it's more of a psychological suspense, but I did want to give it a shout out because I really enjoyed this book, especially because it was this author's debut and it absolutely crushed it. In this book, you're following this mother named Blythe Connor who has a daughter, and she has a lot of trouble connecting with her daughter. She feels like her daughter doesn't behave like other children do. She thinks there may be something wrong with her. She's just not getting that attachment that she really wanted to have with her child. Her husband really invalidates all of her concerns about their daughter. He says everything is fine. He doesn't understand why she could feel this way, why she's having trouble connecting with the daughter. And so she really begins to doubt herself and wonder if it's all just in her head. But then they have another child. They have a little boy, and she really connects with this little boy. She loves him. It's exactly what she thought motherhood would be. But then something terrible and tragic happens in their family that really causes her to question everything she knew about motherhood and her connection with her children. This book just absolutely does what it sets out to do. It is so well written. It is so engaging. It includes other elements that really add complexity to the story and talk about generational trauma. And it is just really well done. So definitely would recommend this one. And then the other honorable mention that I wanted to shout out is more of a mystery, and that is The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. I just really love Stuart Turton's stuff. Both of his books have been incredible for me. This was an absolute 5-star. This is a story that is set on a ship back in the 1600s. There is this detective named Samuel Pepys, who is the world's greatest detective. He is being transported over to Amsterdam, and he's being held in prison for a crime that you are not aware of. You don't know what he has done to get himself in this situation. You just know he's being in prison on the ship, being taken over to Amsterdam. He also has his bodyguard with him, Errant Hayes, who you are primarily following in the story as he begins to investigate what is going on the ship. There's a really dark omen on the ship. there are dark things happening. There are livestock being killed, weird symbols, whispering, devilish things happening. It may be paranormal, it may not be, but this bodyguard is going to get to the bottom of it. And it is so good. It is such a beautiful book. It is written so well. I love the atmosphere. I love the characters. I love the complexity of weaving the mystery together and these different secrets you're seeing unravel and these different connections between characters you're seeing unravel. I absolutely love this book. It is a little bit long. It's around 400 to 500 pages, but it didn't feel like a long book. I just really loved my experience reading this book, and I definitely recommend it if you like books that feel like a classic mystery. This one is definitely one that I would recommend. So now we can get into the actual thriller books and go through my top 10 thriller recommendations. Coming in at number 10 is a YA thriller called The Girls Ive Been by Tess Sharp. In this book, you're following the daughter of a con artist who ends up getting taken hostage in a bank heist. Not only is she stuck in a bank heist, but she's also stuck in it with her ex-boyfriend and her new girlfriend, and the amount of drama that ensues in all that connection because they used to all be friends. This is a really fun YA thriller that is just really fast-paced, really fun, has really interesting characters and character dynamics. The main character, Nora, is really interesting to explore because she has been so many different girls in her past while she has lived with her con artist mother, and she's got a lot of tricks up her sleeve that can maybe help them get out of this situation. So it's just really fun to watch them navigate this crazy situation while also just navigating good old teenage drama. So if you like a YA thriller, this is definitely one that I would recommend. Next up, coming in at number 9 is The Plot by Jean Homp Korelitz. In this book, you're following Jacob Finch Bonner, who was once a very successful author, but has not been able to really produce anything amazing since his one big book blew up. And so now he is teaching in an MFA program, and then he ends up encountering a student named Evan Parker, who is just very arrogant and obnoxious and thinks his story idea is the absolute best, and so he won't reveal details about it to the class. He doesn't want to be critiqued. He already thinks he's got a bestseller up his sleeve, and then he eventually ends up opening up to the professor about what his idea is. The professor's like, oh, yeah, that actually is a pretty good idea, but I don't know, we'll see if it ever happens. And then years and years pass, the professor goes on with his life, and then one day he thinks, maybe I should look that dude up, see if he ever tried to publish a story, see what happened. Finds out that student has died, so he has the idea to take his story and make it his own. It works out really well for him. The book is a bestseller. It's being made into a movie. It's getting him all this acclaim that he wanted it to get, and everything is looking great until he begins receiving anonymous letters from someone who says that they know he is a thief and that was not his story. And then he gets caught in a tailwind of trying to figure out who is sending him these notes, who knows he stole this story, and worrying that it's going to ruin his career and reputation. In this story, you also get excerpts of the book that he ended up writing, this really great bestseller, and you're very curious as to what could make it so interesting, what could be the plot twist, what could be so enthralling about the story that it was this huge bestseller, and where did this idea come from that this guy had? How did he have this crazy idea? What was it based on? How does that connect to what's going on in the real world and whoever is sending him these letters? And so it just weaves together this really interesting, suspenseful mystery that is also just really well written. I really like the writing style of this book. I will definitely be reading from this author again. The only thing that sort of fell apart for me a little bit, and the reason why it's lower on this list, is because the ending did get to a point where I figured out what was going on before our character did, and I had to spend quite a lot of time reading, just waiting for our character to catch up and figure out, come on, how do you not know what's going on? Let's get to the point, let's get to the end. But otherwise, I thought this was a really enjoyable read. Next up, coming in at number 8 is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is one that is a little more controversial. Some people didn't really enjoy this one, but it's one that I just thought was fast-paced, fun, and exciting. In this story, there is this college professor named Edward Fosca, who is a Greek mythology professor, and he has this group of female students who are pretty obsessed with him, and they call themselves the Maidens, or that's what they're known as on campus, is the Maidens, who are obsessed with this professor. In this story, you're following this woman named Mariana, who is a group therapist, and she ends up getting fixated on this group of young women and this professor when one of the young women is found murdered on the campus, and it is a friend of her niece who attends the campus, so she ends up getting pulled into the mystery. She wants to go see what's going on, make sure her niece is going to be okay, and figure out what's going on with this weird professor. This one I thought was fun because people keep dying in this story. There's not just one death that our main character is investigating. The stakes feel high because people keep getting murdered. Her niece is at this school, and so she really wants to make sure her niece is going to be safe and protected. She herself ends up getting pulled into some dangerous situations and needs to make sure she's going to be safe and protected. There are multiple people in this story story that just give you weird vibes, and you have to try to scope out who's involved and who you can trust. There's also an element of the story where the main character is going through a lot of grief because she has recently lost her husband, and that ends up getting kind of interweaved in the story as well. So I just thought this one was a pretty fun thriller. It's really fast paced. It was really engaging to me. I liked the Greek mythology elements. I liked the elements of grief that were interwoven throughout the story, and it kept me guessing the whole time. And that's what I like in a thriller. So this one's coming in at number 8. Next up, coming in at number 7 is The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Delilah Harris. This is a story that is described as Get Out meets the Stepford Wives, and it is set in the literary publishing world of New York. In this story, you are following an editorial assistant named Nella who works at this publishing house, and she is the only Black woman in the publishing house. She has been trying to push diversity and inclusion efforts for a long time at the publishing house, and it's all very satirical in the way that it gets played out with how people interpret and ignore her efforts to really actually promote diversity in the books they publish, in the people they hire, in the way the house operates. But then one day they actually end up hiring another Black woman named Hazel, and Nella is super excited. She feels like maybe they're going to be able to make some progress together. Maybe they can team up and really try to further promote diversity in the publishing house together. But right after Hazel starts, Nella starts receiving some threatening notes telling her to get out of the publishing house now, and she wonders if Hazel may possibly be involved and may not be the ally that she was looking for. This is definitely a thriller that has some great social commentary throughout it, especially the way that the ending plays out. I thought it was really fun. I love the tension in these letters that are arriving and trying to figure out who's coming after Nella and why. There's also excerpts from a couple different characters woven throughout this story that you're kind of trying to piece together and figure out who they are and why they're a part of the story and why that matters. So I think that also added a nice mystery element throughout the story. But overall, I thought it was a fun, impactful read, and I will definitely be looking out for more work from this author in the future. Next up, coming in at number 6 is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. This is another kind of academic thriller that was a pretty big trend this year, and in this one you are following this teacher named Teddy Crutcher who works at this private academy, and he just wants the best for his students. But while his intentions are good, the things he does are quite questionable and don't always work out in the best way. One of the parents at the school ends up being murdered, and it just becomes a full chaotic event. You follow a couple different perspectives in this story. You follow Teddy, you follow a couple different people and perspectives who are investigating Teddy and want to get to the bottom of what he's doing, and it's just a really thrilling ride. I think this book really nicely balances what it reveals to you and what it does not. There are some things that you are in on, some twists or thrills that you know as a reader are going on, and you're watching different characters try to piece things together. But then there are also elements of the story that are left for you to try to figure out as well that you don't necessarily catch on to, and some really exciting surprises by the end of the story. I just really like Samantha Downing's style. I think her writing is really sharp and witty. Her characters are despicable but intriguing and relatable at the same time. And the setting of this one, just being at this prestigious academy, is also just a really fun element to the story, and I definitely am going to keep picking up more from Samantha Downing in the future. Next up at number 5 is Bathhouse by PJ Vernon. In this story, you're following Oliver Park, who is a recovering addict who finally has everything he wanted in life. He is sober, he has an amazing partner, they live in a great house together. He thinks he finally got his life all figured out. But Oliver makes a mistake. He decides to go to this bathhouse where he ends up in this private room with this man, and he is fully prepared to cheat on his partner and risk throwing away this beautiful life that he has created. But while he is there, something goes terribly wrong, and he barely escapes this encounter with his life. He runs home very scared of what just happened. He has dark bruises all over his throat, and he has to figure out how he's going to conceal this from his partner. And then from there, he just ends up getting himself in this web of lies and deceit. And then this man starts coming after him, and he is trying to evade that while not revealing to his partner what's going on. And it is just a classic runaway train type thriller that keeps you on the edge of your seat and is so engaging. You cannot put it down. It is so fast paced, and then the twists that come in the end just make you want to throw the book to the other side of the room. It is so good. and I do not hear people talking about this one enough. So if you haven't picked this one up yet and you like these really fun, fast-paced, engaging thrillers, this is definitely one that I would say, please pick up. It is so good. Next up, coming in at number 4 is 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is another one that I know a lot of people didn't really enjoy, but I had a lot of fun with it. In this story, you're following Clara and Oliver, who met 56 days ago, right before the COVID pandemic caused Ireland to go into a lockdown. They meet in a grocery store, they strike up a conversation, they go on a couple dates, and then when the lockdown is happening, they decide, hey, why don't we just like move in together for the next 2 weeks while we're under lockdown? We might as well just hang out for the next 2 weeks, kind of get to know each other, work from home together. It'll be a good time. Terrible decision, but also kind of makes a little bit of sense. Like I can kind of see this happening. In the present day, what's happening today is a body ends up dead in that apartment and investigators are trying to figure out what went wrong. In the story, the timeline jumps around a lot as you're following these characters before they meet, when they meet and start going on dates, when they move in together, and what happens through all that time through both of their perspectives, the secrets they're hiding from one another, and how that all leads up to someone ending up dead. I thought this book was just so much fun. I love when there's multiple POVs and a not chronological timeline, so you're piecing things together at different times. You're watching characters piece things together at different times. It was just really exciting to me, really fun. It was a book that I think I read in like 2 sittings. I just wanted to fly through it. So if you don't mind an over-the-top thriller, I think this is one you could have a lot of fun with, even though so many people seem to not like this one. If you can get over the idea of this couple just moving in together who just meets just to spend a 2-week lockdown together and enjoy some cheap thrills, then this is one that I would definitely recommend picking up. All right, we've made it to my top 3 thriller books now. Coming in at number 3 is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. In this story, you're following Mr. and Mrs. Wright. They are a married couple whose marriage is a little bit on the rocks, and so in order to maybe try to attempt to salvage their marriage, they're going to this romantic little cabin retreat in the snowy woods after winning this getaway trip. But it turns out they didn't necessarily win this trip. One of them is lying and they might both not make it out alive. You're also getting throughout this story letters that the wife writes to the husband every year for their anniversary for the past 10 or 11 years, but she's never let him read the letters. So you're reading them and getting a look into how their marriage has devolved over the years and learning things that Adam himself doesn't even know. And I just thought it was so thrilling. It had the perfect isolated snowy atmosphere. I loved that both of the characters couldn't be trusted. You were learning secrets. You were seeing what's gone wrong in their marriage. You were seeing what was going wrong now. There's another kind of thing going on in the story that adds a little bit of a ominous, creepy factor to it. And I just had so much fun. It just had all the elements that I really love in a thriller, and it was really engaging, really fast paced. I couldn't put it down, and it's definitely been a standout favorite of mine from the year. Coming in at number 2 is Every Vow You Break by Peter Swanson. In this story, you are following this woman named Abigail who has fallen in love with this millionaire man and thinks her life is going to be perfectly set up. She's not madly in love with him, but you know, he'll do. She thinks we can get married. This will be my life set up for me and it'll be a nice time. He's a nice man. This is how my life will play out. But on her bachelorette trip, before she gets married to him, she ends up having a one-night stand with a strange man. But because she feels like she's already got her life planned out with this millionaire dude, she just wants to forget about it, move on, and get married. And so she does. But then it becomes a problem when on their honeymoon, that strange man that she had a one-night stand with has now shown up to this isolated island area where she is on her honeymoon and is saying he is in love with her and convinced that they need to be together. So then she has to juggle all of these secrets between these two men and then some other creepy things that are going on the island when there's another woman who is also going through a distressful situation. And it was just so fun. That is really just what I look for in a thriller, is I just want to have a fun time, and this one gave me a fun ride. It was exhilarating, it was fast paced, I didn't know who to trust. You were turning your head back and forth, looking at different characters in different situations and trying to figure out what was going on. There are cheesy moments that feel over the top, and I just love that. I think that is what makes a thriller great for me. So I had a really good time with this one. It also has a really nice atmosphere with it being on an isolated island, so you feel like your character's not going to be able to get away from the situation, which just adds to the tension and the suspense for me. It's another one that some people don't really like, but if you like my style of thrillers that I enjoy, then I would definitely recommend picking this one up. And then finally, coming in at number 1, my absolute favorite thriller of 2021 is Is Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews. This book is just the most fun, entertaining, well-written thriller that I read last year, and so that puts it in my number 1 spot for being my favorite thriller. In this story, you're following this woman named Florence who gets the opportunity to work for this incredibly famous writer who writes under the pen name Maud Dixon. But with the deal, she's gonna have to sign an NDA and be super secretive about it because nobody knows who Maud Dixon actually is. She decides it's worth it. She wants to go get that experience. And so she commits to it and starts working with Maud Dixon. Once she does, she gets pulled into some pretty crazy experiences, and there's just some sketchy things going on with this author that she is trying to figure out. That's really all you need to know about it. The synopsis gives away way too much of the story, so don't read the synopsis. Go in with that amount of information, and it is such a fun, wild ride. The twists at the end are back to back and so fun, and it was just an incredible reading experience. I will say the first like 80 to 100 pages of the story are really slow as it's building up to that point of her going to work with Maud Dixon, and you get to learn about her background. So that part of the story is not as engaging, but once you get past that, it is such a fun time. I definitely recommend it. So that is it for my top 10 thriller books of 2021. Definitely let me know if I have convinced you to read any of these books. Let me know if you've read any of them already and what you think about them, if they were some of your favorites, or there's probably a couple on here that you probably hated, and that's okay. We all have different tastes. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.